Steve Barclay is the Prime Minister's new Chief of Staff. He's already a minister and will now be responsible for implementing the new Office of the Prime Minister. Well, it's all supposed to be a part of a big clear-out and reorganisation at Number 10 in the wake of the Partygate scandal as the Prime Minister fights for survival. So just how bad are things at Number 10? And how will those that are left be feeling? Gavin Barwell was Theresa May's Chief of Staff during some of the most turbulent Brexit years. He joins me now. Good morning, Lord Barwell. Now, given that the Prime Minister was the chief tormentor of your administration, can you tell me with a straight face that you take no pleasure from his present difficulties?
Yeah, I can, because I don't take any pleasure at the difficulties that my party is in at the moment. And from the point of view of the country, I don't think it's anything anyone can take any pleasure in at all, Trevor. I understand...
Not an ounce of schadenfreude? No temptation to say, I told you so, because you did?
Right, well, so there's look, I think we're perfectly entitled to warn, to say to people that the concerns that we raised, both about the Brexit approach the Prime Minister was going to take. You've just had an interview with Jeffrey Donaldson there. Theresa absolutely warned what a border down the Irish Sea might mean for our politics. So I think we're perfectly entitled to say, I told you so. But that's a different thing from what you asked me, which is, do I take any pleasure in seeing that the mess that things are in at the moment? And I don't.
OK, well, that's a very grown-up approach. And, of course, that's why the Prime Minister, the previous Prime Minister, had you in there. You were her Chief of Staff. Steve Barclay is your successor. Is that a good appointment?
So look, I've got a lot of time for Steve. I think he's a really smart person, incredibly diligent. He doesn't take any nonsense. He'll want high standards there. I should declare an interest. He's someone I would consider a friend. So lots of good qualities that he has. I think that there are two challenges. The first is he won't be able to do the job in the way that I or Nick Timothy and Fiona Hill or Ed Llewellyn or Jonathan Powell did it, because he's combining it with being a government minister and an MP at the same time. So he's going to have to find a way of doing the job in a different way. And then the second challenge, and I think probably the key one, is whether the Prime Minister is going to listen to the good advice that he will give. You know, a lot of the focus over the last week or two has been about making changes as Downing Street, as if that will solve the problem. It's worth remembering that Dan Rosenfeld has just announced he's standing down as Chief of Staff. He was brought in by the Prime Minister to clear up the previous mess in Number 10. So there's only so much different advisors can make if the person at the top is not actually listening to the advice that we're given. And to me, the most interesting thing about the events of the last week or so was Munira Mirza's letter, where it was made clear that actually the Prime Minister was told by his advisors not to make that smear about Keir Starmer last Monday, and ignored that advice. And a statement that was meant to show contrition and draw a line under this story actually ended up making his position so much worse.
Just on that point, the business secretary just a few minutes ago said to me that it seemed a perfectly reasonable thing to say in context.
But I completely disagree with that. I mean, look, if I imagine a hypothetical world where I had been advising Boris Johnson before he went into the chamber on Monday, I would have said, under no circumstances, either make any criticisms of your opponents or make any excuses. The job today is to go into the chamber and show genuine contrition, because that is your only hope of drawing a line under this story. So I both think on an intellectual level and a moral level, what he said was not acceptable. I don't want a politics. There's enough things, Trevor, you'll know from the people you interview, there's enough legitimate differences between us for those to be the subject of political debate and argument. We don't want a politics where people indulge in those kind of smears. But even if you set aside that moral argument, on a purely tactical level, it was a stupid thing for the Prime Minister to do, because it's led to the resignation of one of his key aides. It's led to more MPs submitting letters of no confidence in him. It's further destabilised his position. And the point here is that we know he was given advice not to do that and went ahead and did it anyway. So what that tells you is that, yes, having the right people around you can help, but ultimately the culture in Number 10 and the decisions the government makes come from the top. And the Prime Minister himself, if he's going to stay in office, is going to have to change the way he is behaving and running the government.
Isn't the problem here then, and I speak to you as an experienced advisor, that actually he doesn't take advice? And you could have Socrates, Machiavelli, and whoever else you liked in there to advise him. But he, when he's got it in his head, won't take that advice, cannot help himself, and he will do what he wants. Isn't the problem here? It's not the advisors, not the circle around him, it's the Prime Minister.
So that definitely has been the problem. And the question is whether it's going to change. The other person that he's bringing into number 10 is the new Director of Communications, Gavin Barwell, who was one of his key advisors when he was Mayor of London. So there was a period, as you'll know from your own experience, when he was running London, where first with Simon Milton, then with Eddie Lister, he had a team around him that he did seem to listen to and respect. So it is possible that these changes, he might pay more attention to this new team than he was to the previous one. But you're absolutely right about what the problem has been up until now.
I don't want to take too much time on this specific point, but every time one of these things happens, he says, there was no party. Oh, yes, there was a party. I wasn't at the party. Oh, yes, I was at the party. There's whatever it is about Keir Starmer, That somebody says he's going to change. He says he's going to change. And then he does it all over again.
Yeah, so look, I think at some point in the future, when someone's writing a book about how to handle political scandals, the events of the last few months will be like chapter 1 of how not to do it. If you imagine a hypothetical world where when this story was first raised, Number 10 had quickly established the facts, put them out there, issued a genuinely contrite apology, that might have been okay to get through that. What is indisputable is that the way that the truth has been dragged out of them over the last 2 or 3 months has made this situation far, far worse, far more damaging to the Prime Minister's reputation. We're at a point today where somewhere between 60 and 70% of your viewers think the Prime Minister should resign. And ultimately, whatever comes out of the police investigation or the final version of the Sue Gray report, if he can't turn those numbers around, if his personal polling remains where it is today, then Conservative MPs are going to make a change sooner or later.
Well, you've been kind enough to be one of our viewers today. Where are you on that? Which side of that line are you on? Should he go, as the 60 or 70% think?
I think I'm not one of the Conservative MPs that are going to make the decision. Ultimately, they're the people that are going to make the decision.
But you're a viewer, you're a smart man, you've been there. Should he resign? Is that the best thing for the party and for the country?
So I am, on the moral issue, I find it very, very difficult to defend the way in which he has run Number 10 and the way in which he has tried to cover up what's happened. And on the pragmatic test, which your viewers will probably have less sympathy with, about what's the right thing for the Conservative Party to do, I am very sceptical about whether it's going to be possible for him to restore his standing with the British public. So my inclination is that the Conservative Party would be better making a change. And I also think for the good of the country in terms of trust and faith in our politics, there's a strong case for change. But it's not up to me to make a decision. Ultimately, this is a decision that up until the next election, at least, is one for Conservative MPs.
Well, and it's a decision for him. So if you were his advisor, would you be saying, Boris, time's up?
I don't think there's a chance in hell that the Prime Minister is going to voluntarily resign. He's going to stay there unless Conservative MPs remove him or unless he loses an election. And so, I don't see any prospect of him voluntarily standing down, Sean.
Gavin Barwell, thank you so much for your time and your experience this morning.
My pleasure.